There's a money-making machine and there's a meaning-making machine. Now, most people think that they have to be the exact same thing. Let's say I'm a musician and that's something I really enjoy doing. They may go down the route of I have to get paid to be a musician. There's a different things.
I've struggled with this very podcast. I love what I learn every time I sit down. Just like you with your writing, this is me working out my own shit. And then the money making is something that, I did as a trader and I do with my investing. Like, it's okay that those two things are completely separate. It kind of puts me at ease because I haven't had that architecture around it.
Don't find the perfect answer to the wrong question.
Wow.
Two things I want to ask myself in anything. What is the intention of me doing it? And then defining success. Like in a business context, like we got to hit these KPIs, we hit these profits, we hit these revenues or whatever it is. Why do you want to grow a business? What are you actually looking to get out of that? Oh, I'm wanting to feel validated, important. And am I actually looking for those feelings in the wrong spot? I also don't want to completely go on one side of the spectrum and just be like, no, you don't need to achieve success or earn money or anything like that. I was like, no, I actually truly believe true freedom is downstream from financial freedom. But that does not mean I'm separating that out from trying to become a person of wholeness. And it's why I believe being able to hold the tension of a paradox is so much of where wisdom comes from in life.
Well, you were mentioning Ken Wilber in the car.
Yeah.
Have you studied much of his work or is this?
A fair bit. I was actually, do you know Ben Pikowski?
No.
Oh, okay. Amazing dude. He was like a professional bodybuilder, super smart cat, amazing human being as well. I remember I sent him a message saying thanks because he got me onto Integral Meditation, one of Ken Wilber's books. This must have been like 6-7 years ago now. And that put me into a massive rabbit hole. Sometimes when you bring up Ken's work, some people are really adverse to it, like critical of it. I think he's onto some amazing shit, to be perfectly honest. And a lot of it's taken me a while to make sense of it. Mm-hmm. But to now be like, oh, like waking up, growing up, cleaning up, showing up, opening up. Do you know what I mean? Like, okay, these are the different areas that we need to start looking into, and how do I progress in each of these, and what practices do I do in each of these as well? So I've been applying, like, what do I need to do, and why does this actually matter? And what I find so fascinating with what he talks about is like with most of the wisdom traditions, like Buddhism, Sufism, Taoism, their practices are all about the waking up stage and how that is only one of the 5 key areas to start opening up into wholeness. So that's where you can have somebody, let's say, has a enlightening experience or becomes enlightened, if you wanted to use that label, but yet will sexually abuse, his members.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, well, how can somebody have this enlightening experience, but then do these, say, morally or ethically things that are incorrect? It's because he hasn't grown morally and ethically and in those areas. So there's all of these different areas for us to become whole. And that's where Ken's work, I'm like, oh, like that makes sense to me. And I've been able to then actually use that and then change the things that I do so that I can hopefully progress better down that path as well.
Well, what comes to mind for me, it's almost like going into a plant medicine ceremony and you have this enlightened experience and you see things like, aha. And if you don't integrate any of that, you're missing out on the real magic. You just have this novel experience.
And that's where, like, the way I perceive, especially in the plant medicines world, is the work is what you do like before, but then after. Do you mean like the work isn't sitting there having the medicine? That's the easy part. You know what I mean?
It really is.
When you ingest the substance, okay, like you've got to go through it. And hopefully, like for me, I go in it with the intentions of like curiosity and wanting to let go of expectations, wanting to let go of I hope I have this, oh my God, like fireworks.
Yeah.
God, do you know what I mean?
Yes.
Experience, and then wanting to be like, what can I take from it to then apply for later. I remember going into a plant medicine ceremony, like this is a little while ago now. And my mate, rightly so, my mate was like, what are you searching for? And I was like, oh yeah, like let me take a step back and like, what am I searching for? And I wanted to kind of like check myself to make sure I wasn't doing it for the wrong reasons. Like just going into, I'm sure we know plenty of people that are like that.
I've had a few of those where I've gone like, let's just go have, let's go have an experience without true intention.
Mind blowing. Like I remember I went into one 5-MeO ceremony like that. It's just like, this is just going to.
And for those who don't know, 5-MeO is by many considered like the Mount Everest of psychedelics. It's a 15-minute rocket ship in a washing machine tornado. It can be super hectic. So to go into that, which I've done the same thing.
Last time I was in Austin, I was talking to a friend and he was talking about how they had just done, he knew someone that had done MDMA, then that went into 5-MeO.
I haven't heard that before.
Yeah. And the 5-MeO was through IV.
I haven't heard of that either.
Yeah. So the experience was even
Jesus.
longer. Yeah.
And what was
Well, the guy said it was absolutely amazing.
Okay.
Sounds like it would be. Yeah, but it was like the MDMA like opened your heart. And so it's a bit of a process. Then you time as the MDMA is coming down. That's when you do the 5-MeO experience. And you kind of like, oh, that's interesting how people are like stacking these things. But then the critique side of me is like, are these things supposed to be stacked with each other? Like, and then also where is the ritual and sacredness around these things as well? Yeah, I like to kind of look and argue both sides of that part.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know what I was amazed? Have you sat with ayahuasca before?
Yeah. I've got twice before, and I'm going on a hunt later this year in Hawaii that has that as a part of the experience as well.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I've sat with it once. I mean, it was multiple sessions over the course of the week, but what was fascinating to me was the 2 weeks leading up to it, on dieta. And for those who don't know, it stands for diet, but you really just clean your body and your mind of everything. And so no caffeine, no nicotine, no any kind of stimulants or anything, no sugar, no salt, no beef, no pork, kind of get the idea. So
no ejaculation.
No. Oh, I keep forgetting to say that one. Yeah. And that one is like, that was like that may have been 3 weeks out. And then you have the week you're gone. And then it's another 2 weeks after that it's recommended to abstain. And so it's 6 weeks, which is, for a lot of us, that's much longer than we've gone. Unfortunately, for some people, that's par for the course. Fortunately, I'm not one of them. But what I gained in that 2 week period of understanding about myself and how often I would reach for stimulants. And then as I couldn't scratch that itch because they were off the table, I had to sit with that like, oh, okay, that's interesting. I'm going to this right now. What am I not wanting to feel about me? Okay. And I would go layers deeper. Okay. What's going on with me? Why can't I just be okay with where I'm at right now? What am I striving for? And it was like, I had such a greater understanding about me than frankly I had on probably 4 or 5 different mushroom ceremonies I'd have. I'd have 3 different 5-MeO experiences. Wachuma is obviously a little more gentle, so that doesn't maybe bring up as much, or at least it didn't for me. Brother, it was like I almost didn't need to take the medicine because I had taken so much away. Now, when I took the medicine, there was a world of other stuff to learn about myself. And I definitely went further down that rabbit hole about safety and how I didn't feel safe and how that manifested for me. And, always being on the go, because if I stayed still, I wasn't safe. And safety for me was like showing my dad, like, hey, look at me. I'm a good boy. I'm good at school. I'm good at sports. I work hard. Oh, I have a great job. Ooh, look at me. I'm making money. I have a family. I have all these things, but I was always charging ahead. A lot of risk. It could be in, the altered states, they're not all done sacredly. And so like really pushing the envelope with that stuff, but it was like always just moving, always charging ahead. And it was like, bro, you're safe. You're safe now. You don't need to have that be your operating system. And so that's something that, since that experience, like not only have, on some level I've embraced it and also fallen deep into that, like charging ahead again. And it's like become such an unconscious thing for me that it is a default for me right now. And, we were talking on the ride up here that, I found myself kind of over the summer and, up until about 4 or 5 weeks ago, still operating in that and heavy on stimulant use, whether it was nicotine, caffeine, cannabis, not necessarily stimulant, but that was just to allow me to check out. And, maybe I was playing golf, mushrooms, the feel free with the kava and the kratom. Like I was just on, as we like to say, I was on all the rides. And it was there is an element of it that could be considered fun and playful and easy and just being in a particular space. But ultimately it was me like not wanting to deal with some things and to kind of kick the can down the road, which I don't necessarily think is a bad thing, because I've been through this cycle before, and I know that at any given point I can shut it off cold turkey. And I think what I was sharing with you is while I did go cold turkey, it was like one thing at a time. I cut out the thing that was the hardest and I leaned into some other things just to allow that period to be a little bit easier. Then I would shuffle off another until finally I was down to caffeine about 10 days ago. I'm like, all right, today's the day. And fortunately for me, this is a bit of like a little infomercial for it, but I've had this update drink that has really been a super gentle, easy, little energy clarity booster for me that doesn't affect my sleep, doesn't affect my mood necessarily. I mean, I feel good. I mean, I guess that affects my mood, but it's been nice to land where I am right now. I would say as clean as I've been, and understanding that I don't necessarily today, and if you look over the course of my 52 years, I don't necessarily have a moderation setting for certain things. And in the altered states, changing my state, whatever you want to call it, that space, I don't have it right now. And so abstinence is really the best policy for me. The cannabis is pretty harmless. We were talking about it. I have no governor on what goes into my body. I eat like, a 10-year-old whose parents dropped him off at a grocery store and no one's in there. And I've got an unlimited budget. It's just, and then there's the shame around like, I just ate fucking 12 popsicles and I'm just getting started. You know what I mean? Like I am just peanut butter with fucking apple. Okay, this is somewhat healthy, but I'm eating like a lot of it. And then you just
peanut butter and carrot for me is the thing, I can just mow through it.
So this is kind of all to say, I have to I've had a bit of a come to Jesus moment. I need to continue to look at myself in the mirror and be honest with myself that I cannot do some of these things because it starts with one or a half. And a week later, 2 weeks later, I'm full blown into the experience. And I'm dependent on it. It's controlling me. It's sapping my natural energy. It's only getting me back to baseline. It's this so much downside for most of these things for me now that I just need to abstain. And, like I was telling you on the car ride, like I really like this version of me. It's like clear-headed. It's more me than any version I felt in a long time. And I know there's a lot underneath that's waiting to be discovered. But I needed to clear out the things that allowed me to not feel and check out. And that's what a lot of these things have done. When used appropriately, they can be fucking amazing. But I haven't shown the ability to use nicotine pouches appropriately. I start with it. I feel a little boost. A week later, I've got one in almost the entire day and I don't even feel much, but it's habitual.
I love this conversation with the ability to then look at different areas of life as to where it is. So for example, if we use what stimulants am I using in my life right now? I want to be able to, and this is where I enjoy the nuance in the discussions as well, because far too much, I believe in this world, everyone is either looking for a prescription. So it's like, give me the 7 steps to make $10 million tomorrow, right? And it's like, well, there is no prescription there. And also the process that I went through to create whatever success I've created is not going to be the same thing that you should do either. And so that's when people are like, I find it really interesting when people ask like, what's your diet, Chris? And they want to know what your macros are and what your food is and the timing and all these things. And it's like, you're actually asking the wrong question. I understand where it's coming from, but it's a uneducated, misguided question, which could lead you down the wrong path. So for me, I found like a couple of examples was out of all of the different plant medicines that I've done, I reckon I've had a real good crack at a lot of them. Like, I reckon I've had a good crack at it. And I've always wanted to keep the sacredness of it, the rituals that are behind it and not go down the deep end. I think I've done a pretty good job with it. And I've tried to check myself along the way. And for me, one of the best experiences I had, I've done 2 darkness retreats. And for me, so I got into it. This was actually quite a few years ago that I did them. Was a case of this Buddhist teacher that I was really wanting to learn a lot from, especially down the Dzogchen lineage. And I was like, darkness retreats. I was like, that's great. Like I was thinking of doing another meditation retreat. I'd done a silence meditation retreat quite some years ago. It was actually the first time I did psilocybin mushrooms was when I did that. And
on the silent retreat?
Yeah, on the silent retreat.
Damn.
And so and again, for context with it, my history and culture that I came up with, like with drugs and drinking. So I haven't drank alcohol in over 11 years now. And I'd seen my father drink a lot. And so I was like, I don't like that. Like I remember as a kid, I was like, I don't like that. And so that's why I think I have easily just turned off alcohol.
But you did have a period
like,
where
for like my early 20s, I drank a lot.
Yeah, you tried it on.
But then I got to a point and there was quite a pivotal time in kind of my evolution where I was just like, I'm just done with it. Like I'm literally not interested in it. And then there was the case of like, I'd never done party drugs and those sorts of things. And I guess this really comes down to like the poverty of our language as well, because we use drugs. We could use drugs for heroin, cocaine, ayahuasca, 5-MeO. Like you can use that label drugs upon all of them, but we know they're very different as to what those substances can do and when properly applied and used. And so I remember this meditation, this Buddhist teacher for me, I was talking about doing my first darkness retreat. I was like, oh, I'm going to go in for 7 days. And he was like, no. He's like, there's no need for you to go all that way. And he could see, and he so beautifully pointed at for me to see that whenever I do something, I do it at 100 miles an hour. Do you know what I mean? Like,
I have no idea what you mean.
Yeah, if I'm going to
this is a very foreign concept.
I'm going to train my absolute ass off. And if I'm not dragging my ass out of the gym, I haven't trained properly. If I'm going to diet, I'm going to diet down to 4% body fat. Like if I'm going to do a darkness retreat, I'm doing 7 days. Yes. I was reading accounts of people who have done like 45-day darkness retreats and the stuff that they were literally like seeing or perceiving and all this stuff. And I was like, yeah, give me some of that.
Yes.
And he's so gently, it was so beautiful of him. He was French as well. So he's just the accent and trying to understand it. He so gently pointed out for me to see there's no need to go like full throttle. He was just like, just test it. And he was saying like, just go in for a day. So I went in for 2 days, my first one, and it was profound. And I think being able to go into, I think just life, to be honest, with curiosity, and the curiosity is to be able to sit with yourself, to be able to then see like what's coming up for me and like, what am I feeling? Where am I feeling it? Why am I feeling it? Is that actually true? And creating this subject-object relationship with like you, the most corest you that you could try to fathom, and what's coming up. So such as like, you are not your thoughts.
Mm.
And for me, that was profound. When I truly understood that, you are not your thoughts, I was like, oh my God, because I can sit in meditation now and see these thoughts come up, and then I can see them dissolve away and then just be gone as well. And I was like, just having that ability to let things pass through was amazing. And so for me, those darkness retreats was that experience to be able to have of, oh, like, what is going on with me today? What am I feeling? Why am I feeling it? And then being able to then try to best, and we're talking about like the integration and doing the work after these experiences, being able to then be able to use that as to, okay, well, like, why am I reaching out for caffeine? Why am I wanting these other substances? Why am I doing these certain things? And we're talking about in the car here, which was, why am I wanting to achieve these certain things in life? Why am I doing this thing? Why am I wanting to have more success, earn more money? What am I ultimately trying to feel at the end of the day? And I think when I really trying to excavate this question and these questions around this, we're wanting to feel safety, as you said, we're wanting to feel love and acceptance. And I think a lot of the time we're trying to do things and we're trying to look for getting a feeling out of somewhere that's not going to give us that lasting feeling. And on the other side of that, I also don't want to completely go on one side of the spectrum and just be like, no, you don't need to achieve success or earn money or anything like that. I was like, no, I actually truly believe that true freedom is downstream from financial freedom. I think having the skill sets and being able to earn money and provide a living, I think is actually very important. But that does not mean I'm separating that out from spirituality or trying to become a person of wholeness or any of that stuff. I think they're actually very much the same path that you have to walk together. And it's why I believe being able to hold the tension of a paradox is so much of where wisdom comes from in life. Being okay with that. And in much of the case, I feel like I can be okay with being agnostic with so many things as well. Like I had a conversation yesterday about doing like human designs, for example. And I'm like, I can be agnostic with it. I don't have to be fully sold into it. I can see it and I can apply some of those things and I can use some of it and go, oh, that's interesting because like, for example, if in that human design stuff, I'm a manifesting generator.
Yeah.
And one of my aspects is guilt is something that I should lean into and use. So like if I feel guilty about doing something, it's actually a North Star for me to go towards that. hope is something I shouldn't use. So if I feel hopeful about something, I feel hopeful that I was like, if I do this podcast, am I hopeful that it's going to turn out well? If I do this business venture, if I take on this business partner or whatever it is, am I feeling, if I ever use hope, and it's actually really true because I can look back and go, oh, I was hopeful that was going to work out. And dude, it fucking kicks me at my ass. It did not work out. Where for me, something that has been very relevant is being able to be like, oh, if I feel guilty about doing something, but I feel satisfied by doing it. And satisfaction for me was something I just very recently realized I'd never asked myself that. Like I've never asked myself, like, do I feel satisfied with me and what I'm doing? And then the realization was I'd never actually applied that with my sex life. For me, satisfaction was always about my partner, my wife. And it was like, is she satisfied? Do you mean, is she going to come? Because then if she was, then amazing. And I think again, it's that paradox. I want to be able to have that oneness, that wholeness, especially in intimacy. But I was completely losing out on my own satisfaction. I was never asking myself that. And I'd been like, oh my God, I've got a really long time having sex with this deep questioning and performance anxiety. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I was like, if I'm not big enough, hard enough, lasting long enough, like all of those things, I'm just an absolute failure as a man.
How do you feel then when you come, I would say before she does, but if you, most times, at least in my experience, when I come first, there's no coming after for her. So it's like, how do you feel when you get that release and she doesn't get that release for herself?
Full transparency, I feel shit.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
No, seriously. And
apologetic and that type of shit.
Have you ever read like Mantak Chia's work? So he's got one book that I got recommended and I read ages ago called The Multi-Orgasmic Man.
I have that book. I have not read it yet.
Yeah. So I kind of went down that route of doing not ejaculating and being able to work. And I don't think I've actually really nailed it when it came to like being able to have full body orgasms and the separation between orgasm and ejaculation. They're different things.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we totally got brought up that they were the same thing. And I think especially it's like as a teenager, you want to rub one out and you want to do it as quick as possible and you want to get to that end like explosiveness. So it's the sneeze, feels good, but then it's completely done.
I never heard that, the sneeze. I like that.
There's greater wisdom and education and like what can actually come from it as a man being able to cultivate that sexual energy and what you can do with it as well. And so, for example, in Think and Grow Rich, like I think one of the most overlooked or people don't even get to that far down the book is sexual transmutation. So it's like, how do you actually transmute that sexual energy into the rest of your life? I heard someone say, so doing 60% of the time, it works every time. Who knows about the actual statistic, but that the very, very, very vast majority of millionaires are married. Now, that doesn't surprise me because the way that I perceive it is if I don't have my energy being leaked because I'm not trying to chase tail the whole time, like I'm not walking around Whole Foods or the gym or wherever thinking about, oh, she's hot. How do I take her to bed? I don't have that conversation. I don't have that internal conflict. I just get on with my day and I'm able to then channel my energy just for my wife. And so that transmutation of energy is one way for that to be able to happen. So for me, oh God, I'll throw myself under the bus. It was just before, it wasn't that long before I came on this trip, making love to my wife, amazing. And then she's like, oh, I'm not going to come. I want you to come. And then I felt horrendous. Oh, you piece of shit, Chris. Why can't you make your wife come? What's going on right now? What have you done wrong today? Do you mean like what? And like, this internal dialogue kicks in. And then I was like, I wasn't, and therefore I'm not being present for her. So that's going to make it even worse for me to get the outcome that I was wanting her to have anyway, because I'm totally dysregulated from that experience.
Dude.
I'm a mess, aren't I? Jesus.
No, well, if then we both are, because that is so resonant. I feel that, like, if she says, I'm not going to be able to pull the trigger today. It's like, how did I not show up that I can't satisfy her? Yeah. And it's like making it all about me. And it's fucking not, I mean, maybe she's got something on her mind and that she's battling with. It has nothing to do with me, but I've become so just like, it's about me that, I have that guilt about, and she's even talked to me about it. She's like, why do you, it's not you're completely missing the point here. It's not about me. It's about our intimacy in the moment. And that just it's really cool when it happens, and it happens often, but it's not going to happen every time.
But it's also, so then I found with myself, it's actually that foundational belief is incorrect, that sex must then lead to orgasm.
Yep.
No, it doesn't have to. There's so much more. Like, why can't we just like play each other and be in that sexual energy and enjoy that? And it doesn't have to have this end outcome. It's great if it does. But again, there's just that separation between why am I doing this action and defining success of it.
Yeah.
So two things I want to ask myself in anything, to be honest, in life is, what is the intention of me doing it? So for me, success isn't what the end outcome is of that action. Success is the intention behind what that action is actually coming from. And then defining success or defining done. Like in a business context, like we define success. What is it? What are the KPIs? What are the metrics that we're actually defining this of? And again, that can be incorrect, as we've talked about in the car, where it's like, I'm building a business and we're looking at this point of view of, we got to hit these KPIs, we hit these profits, we hit these revenues, or whatever it is. And what can be like that time that I had with Derek Sivers, for example, was just really fascinating, because it's like, why do you want to grow a business? Why do you want it to grow? What are you actually looking to get out of that? And that's where it's like, oh, I'm wanting to feel validated. I'm wanting to feel important. I'm wanting some sort of significance out of doing these things. And am I actually looking for those feelings in the wrong spot?
Yeah, because the bigger that number is on an exit, we associate the more significance we feel, the more importance we feel, the more impact we have. And in a measurable sense, you could make the argument, yeah, there's some truth there, but what void are we trying to fill? And is it actually, it's something completely different. No number is going to fill that void.
Yeah. And I think for me, I think I'm starting to lean towards the answers like a both and, where it's like, hang on, I'm not wanting to say, no, I don't want to do business anymore and I don't want to earn more money anymore. But again, the intention is coming from a different place, where the game of business for me, the side effect of it is money, but I'm not doing it because of money, and I'm not demonizing money whatsoever as well. And I'm loosening, I'm definitely not there, but I'm loosening my attachment to it as well. And for me, it's, how do I actually start bringing more joy into this process? Because for me, I just become utilitarian with how I acted. Do you mean it was like, I'm walking because I need to get my steps up? Like, I'm drinking this drink because I need my electrolytes today. Do you mean like I'm doing this action because it has this measurable thing that I'm trying? Like, everything had a clear, defined purpose, and I lacked joy and I lacked play in my life. So now I'm really working towards, like, I want joy and play, and I'm allowing myself, and I'm finding it really difficult, if I could be honest, but I'm allowing myself to start leaning into that process of like, I just want to be in an amazing conversation with Cal, and it doesn't matter what, like, I don't care about, and this is the beauty of the way that I'm actually doing like the content that I do, is because I've separated it out from money making. So money making and meaning making to me are two different things. And the way I explained it is like there's a money making machine and there's a meaning making machine. Now, most people think that they have to be the exact same thing, like their passion and their purpose, words that they might use. So it's like, oh, let's say I'm a musician and that's something I really enjoy doing. They may go down the route of I have to get paid to be a musician. There's a different thing. So my meaning making, my money making, most people think those two things have to be the exact same. For me, I've like separated them out. They slightly kiss but there's not like my company that makes me money this has nothing to do with it whatsoever. I'm not here for this whatsoever. So I'm trying to have purity behind why I'm wanting to produce what I want to produce and say what I want to say and share that kind of stuff. Could that be wrong? It totally could be wrong. Like only time will really tell when it comes with it. But I also, and for example, like I don't look at the analytics with any of my stuff. And I told like my content manager and stuff, I was just like, just don't tell me the analytics of it. I want to know what's good and what's bad. Like what do I do more of when it comes into it? And then I can sit with like, what is it that I want to share, for example? So like my thinking is done through writing. Like if I'm not writing in a journal or typing stuff out and writing stuff, like any of my essays, it's all, actually, to tell you the truth, all of my content is just me trying to solve my own shit.
Yeah.
Do you mean like
it comes through too? I love reading your writing.
Well, I've got a lot of shit to sort out, I guess, but it's a case of like, I'm just trying to solve my own problems and hopefully I can then, I want to lay it down. If somebody can profit from it and takes use of it, amazing. If not, that's perfectly fine as well. But that's where I also come to the point of this where it's like, I'm not trying to prove anything. Like I'm not trying to tell somebody what to do, which is interesting because I've come from like the business coaching world.
Oh, sure.
You know, it's like, hey, like, here's how you do this thing. Here's how you get more clients. Here's how you increase your revenue. Here's how you increase profit margins. Where with the stuff that I find really fascinating to talk about, it's not like that because I don't think there are actually like true answers when it comes to this stuff as well. Like, and why I enjoy having conversations with you because it's going to be a case of like, what are you doing, Cal? Okay, you're playing around with, you've taken caffeine out, you've taken this out. We're talking about how both of us, like when we have cannabis, hey, I feel really good. I feel mellow. I sleep really well, but God damn it, I could eat everything when it comes to it as well. So I was like, oh, that's a negative. So then this is funny. I'm flawed. I would then go, okay, so if I have that effect of I could just eat, I'll do that purposefully on days I know that I need to put more calories in.
Oh, yeah.
So then it's really easy for me. So then I'm actually, like there's no like shitty foods in the house.
Yeah.
So if I am going to like eat heaps, well, I'm just eating heaps of sweet potato chips or like rice cakes with almond butter and jam on it. Like, I'm not, do you know what Tim Tams are?
No.
Oh, they're an Australian biscuit. So they're absolutely incredible. But like, I'm not smashing packets of Tim Tams, for example, they're not going to do me well.
Well, that's the problem with having, older teenagers in the house. It's like they ask for all that shit. And if you don't buy it, they're going to go buy it. So it's readily available. But you know what? One thing you bring up this money making and meaning making, and it's like, I'd love to dig into that a little bit deeper because I think that we are told that you do something you love, you never work a day in your life. Da 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 da. I get it. It's rare. And I've struggled in some ways with this very podcast in that, I've been doing it for 4+ years. I fucking love it. I love the conversations. I love frankly, first and foremost, I love what I learn every time I sit down, right? Yeah. Just like you with your writing, this is me working out my own shit. And I have struggled with like, why haven't I put more resources in like trying to blow up the podcast and getting it here and getting it there? And it's like, and it's okay to do that. Yes, but I just I love where it's at. I love the ease that I have. I love that I look forward to it. I love that there's not added pressure to yada, yada, yada. That's like true meaning in what I do here. And then the money making is something that, I did as a trader and I do with my investing. And like, it's okay that those two things are completely separate. It doesn't mean that there's not some meaning in the money making part. There's playing that game can be really fun for me. It's certainly an incredible teacher for me when I'm going through some struggles with it. But the podcast certainly does not touch at all that money making thing. It is whatever the opposite of money making is that.
Yeah. Money spending.
Yes, it's very much money spending. And it's like just hearing you lay that out really kind of puts me at ease around that in a way that when I think I've been at ease in the past has been more of a bypassing of like what I'm really feeling because I haven't had that architecture around it with these two concepts. And yeah, I love where it's at. It is something that I have a lot of affinity for. And I love when people listen to the podcast, and I'm still just amazed at how many people do listen to it. And I love when people comment and reach out, and so many people that aren't necessarily my close friends, but are kind of like one layer away from that will just say like, hey, I listened to your latest podcast, and it come to find out they listen to all my podcasts. And it's like, holy shit. You forget that when you're kind of in your bubble. You and I are having this conversation. It's like, we're just having this conversation. And so I'm grateful for you for bringing that up because it just gives me more context for what I'm doing, particularly in this space.
And I think that's where, for us men, the ability to understand why we're doing something, being able to frame something properly so that we can best make sense of it and why we're doing it. And I totally agree with you. This content creation, this podcasting stuff, it's really interesting. Like I started my first podcast 10 years ago. And for me, it's always been so amazing how, like, you're a great example of this. Our friendship was born out of us coming together this way. And many of my friendships were born out of the exact same way. Like, we had done a podcast together and we're like, dude, we totally vibe on so many things. Our value systems are similar and we just get along really well. We can chat about stuff. Like, anytime I come here, I want to see you and catch up. Like that's a win.
Yeah.
That's a win right there. And if I also get external validation because then people listen and they go, oh my God, this was really good. This really helped. This is fantastic. Like, yeah, of course, like people saying nice things to me, like I have an ego, that external validation feels really good.
Sure.
And so if I can create a flywheel effect where I'm doing something that brings me joy and then at the same time puts value and goodness out into the world, then have at it. I think that's a fantastic thing to be able to do. And so for me, it's playing around with that concept of have I made sense as to what is going on and why I'm doing something in my life? And is it truly serving me? And is it a case of, like, we're talking about like the money-making things in an easy example to use, because we can look into our bank accounts, we can look at the revenue of what's going on in a business, and we can say it's a win or a lose. Like, am I doing good or am I doing bad? We're creating these judgments on it. But so much of the time, like, I've had a lot of conversations with business owners that were essentially unhappy with their business. They weren't super hyped or even a little bit pumped to kick their legs out of bed to go back into another day with their business and go forward with it. And it was amazing to me having so many of those conversations, and also amazing to me how many of those conversations. So like when I sold the last company, I spent about a year just consulting like 6, 7, 8-figure entrepreneurs. And I clocked over 220 hours of having these conversations and doing these consulting sessions. And so much of the time it would start out the conversation with a very tactical and strategical, what's going on in the business, let's do this, like, okay, let's fix these things. And then it wouldn't take very long. Like sometimes it would be a couple of minutes, sometimes it could be 30 minutes into the conversation. And it would be like, hang on, oh, this is you. Like the problem is the person. Do you know what I mean? And how they're perceiving it, or like something happening in their personal life that then getting reflected into their business. Or for me, one of my issues that I can have being a CEO is I can start solving problems that aren't really a problem. And so like at the end of every month, I kind of do a wrap up of the month. I'm like, what's going on? What have we done? What has worked? What has not worked? What have we learned? Blah, blah, blah. And I'll share this to the team. Like I'll put it in long form writing. I'll share it to the team as to what's going on. And not last month, the month before, the kind of the maxim that I came to for the month was don't find the perfect answer to the wrong question.
Wow.
And that was we had been working on the perfect answer to the wrong question. So, and again, this is the work that I have to do with myself and what I'm literally going through right now. And so, for example, on this trip, I'm away for 10 days, 5 days in LA, 5 days in Austin first, then 5 days in LA. And then there's the travel time. So I was like, I'm out of the business for 2 weeks. And I said to the team, I was like, boys, I'm out for 2 weeks. The reins are yours. Have at it. I even said, so literally like as of yesterday, today, the next 2 days, the top two guys, essentially my CRO and my COO, are just going out fishing. Right. So it's like they've stepped back and out of the business as well to see how the rest of the team handles everything.
Oh.
Now with me, I definitely did this in the last company, and I think I've maybe become a little bit wiser and I've become better, and I've been able to see this with myself where I just thought I had to be busy and I had to be doing things the entire time. So therefore, that's why I would go out and start solving problems, finding problems that weren't really problems. They weren't the stuff that even needed to be. So me actually being in the business was actually causing more problems. So I had to really sit back and go, oh, I really only need to be doing these things. And so I can jump up and down. And I see people do this. Let's say like, I've said this before. It's like I work 4-hour work days. I work 4 days a week, 4-hour days. So it was like 16 hours would be my work week. Now that's not technically true because my mind is still doing things. I'm reading, I'm consuming, I'm writing, and therefore I don't really care. So like trying to use that metric of 4 hours a day, 4 days a week, doing like I'm doing this, I've got this awesome lifestyle because this is it. It's sexy as a marketing message.
For sure.
But again, it's still using this metric as not the right thing that is ultimately going to get you to where you want. It's not the best thing for the growth of the business because some weeks I need to do more. Some weeks I need to do far less. Like I need to rock up for 90 minutes worth of meetings the week before. Like that was it. The rest of the team was able to do everything. So for me, it's been very much this getting rid of the busyness. And again, if we go back to like the darkness retreats, I just had to sit there and be curious, see what came up, and then be able to work through that. And like I had to practice writing in the dark. I remember my daughters were laughing at me because I'd like be sitting there doing like at the dinner table with my eyes closed writing.
Yeah.
And so at the start, it was terrible because at the start, what I would do, I'd write over it. So like, I wouldn't work down the page. I kept kind of like writing practically over everything I was doing. I wasn't. So then I had to learn like when I finish this line over here, I then have to go down to start a new line. And I actually got pretty good because at the end of the retreats, I could actually, I would have pieces of paper, or I'd kind of like write these epiphanies down, and I could read it. I could make of it, and go, oh, that's really interesting.
Did you come up with that on your own, or does someone recommend, hey, why don't you practice this?
No,
because I wouldn't have thought of that.
Yeah,
that is fucking brilliant.
I tell you what I didn't think of in a darkness retreat: when you go to the bathroom, you do a number 2. How do you know you're clean?
Yeah.
You don't. So I had a shower after every time I had to do
Okay, brilliant. Yep. That's a good hack.
You wipe until you're clean, and then you have a shower. Hopefully I'm not just spreading feces across this room.
So dude, one bunch has come up, but are you familiar with American football at all?
A little bit.
Okay. So Bill Belichick, coach for the Patriots for the past like 25 years, got fired at the end of this past season. So he's been on different mediums. He's got like 4 or 5 different shows he does during the week. So he shares a lot of his wisdom, and what you were talking about with the perfect answer to the wrong question. He was talking about having conversations with his coordinators, and they're wanting to figure out, solve for a few things. And he's like, look, guys, if we don't get this first thing figured out, none of this other shit matters. And so like, what is the thing we actually need to get done? Because yes, we can do better in all these other areas. There can be improvement. To your point, the shit wasn't broke, but you're like, we could be more efficient. And so if I'm just sitting around with my thumbs up my ass, I might as well, fix some shit. And, it's a noble pursuit. It makes sense on paper, but it can, and probably more likely than not, creates more problems and more work. Whereas we're not focused on the big rocks of like, what makes this engine go?
Yes.
And is there a big thing that's, kind of mucking up the gears here? Okay, we can do that. But if we're just trying to optimize every little piece, we optimize this, and then there's something downstream where it fucks something else up. And then so I love that concept of like really keeping it simple. And again, we do it with our health. You're talking about, I'm drinking this because I need my electrolytes. I'm walking for my steps. We're doing all of these things. I go down those rabbit holes so often with, my personal optimization physically and mentally, but physically. And I have so many different devices at home that as I've come back to them, because, this summer I'm away from a lot of them because we're not in Austin, but I come back and I'm somewhat broken, so the idea is, well, let's just do all the things. And this time I didn't. Just like I did with weaning myself off these things, I slowly reintroduced these different modalities, whether it's the hyperbaric chamber, the biocharger. I have a shift wave chair. And then a really close friend of mine opened up an incredible bio wellness lounge here in Austin called Matter, MATTR. We'll link to it in the show notes. He's going to be coming on the podcast. Look, I'm into all this stuff, and I have an idea of what my place would look like. He completely blew me away. I'll
have to go there.
You have to go there. He's got 17 different modalities that that's all, again, a whole nother podcast. My point being is I've slowly reintroduced these things to my life. I've given my day the space to do what needs to be done. I've not overscheduled other things. I'm not trying to do all the things every day to optimize my health. All this to say, it brings back what you talked about in the car, and I'd love to dive in a little bit deeper with this when you talked about Derek Sivers and what the structure of his day is. I think that's an important concept to unpack, because a lot of us see a David Goggins. I had Dan Martell on the podcast. Dan really well. Dan's process works amazing for him. I gained a ton by learning that process. and understood that doesn't quite work for me right now. Maybe it will in the future. Right now, it wasn't sustainable the way I was doing it. I also recognize that so many people talk about their morning practice. I fucking talked about it a lot as, in February, March, like I was really into it. Meditation, cold, training, I was doing all the things and I was in a great rhythm with it. It's not really a part like that. I haven't meditated in quite a while and I feel amazing right now. So for me, even though that worked for me 6 months ago, it doesn't need to be the thing I went back to get the wheels back on the track. This time, I just tried to slow everything down. And like I said, rather than cut everything out cold turkey and then do all the things to get to that optimization, I just slowly, it was like this slow on ramp. And it's definitely something that I try to recommend to people when they're wanting to know what to do about their fitness, to do about their nutrition. It's like, ain't changing everything. Change 10%. Work with that for a couple of weeks. Whatever it is, right? There's some sort of like, take your baby steps. I finally fucking took my own advice and it has been such a joy that it's a bit cliche, but I felt like after like a couple of weeks, it's like every day I just started to feel a little bit better. And that was a trigger for me that like, you're on the right path. And what I experienced earlier in the year where I really felt like I was on fire and it was amazing. And it was like such kinetic energy and extreme clarity about today and the future and 25 years out and all that. And it was very intoxicating. And it was like sleeping 3-4 hours a night, having incredible energy, being on no stimulants, like high on my own supply, all that shit. But I just knew it wasn't sustainable, but fuck it. Like, I'm here now. Like, what am I going to not do this? Like, this is amazing. It was like taking the most incredible drug. And this is a different orientation towards like what I'm meant to be doing. And it feels more grounded and it feels, like I said, more sustainable. I can see a much clearer path and I got to shout out, I mentioned him in the car, a close friend, James Fitzgerald, who just like, a guy that if people don't know who he is, back in 2007, he won the very first CrossFit Games, incredible athlete, incredible coach, incredible person who's just done a lot of his own personal work and is a great friend and mentor to me. And I was having lunch with him this summer. And was just telling him I was struggling with a few things and like I kind of needed to be doing something here and like really I wanted to push this and push into that. And he really just gave me a reflection about, where is the contentment in your life? Why do you feel the need? Like, where is this coming from? And, I won't get into all the details of the conversation, but it was like, for someone like him who you would maybe label as a hard charger and going and achieving and doing all the things, it was like I needed to hear it from him. He gave me permission. I'd say whether he realized it or not, he knew he was. He's a Jedi, but he gave me permission to be okay, to be up, in Idaho for 6 weeks and just play golf and have fun and hang out. Now, next year, my intention is to go up there without all the stimulants. And it's like, can I just go have fun for the sake of having fun and being around the guys and playing golf? Now, I'm practicing that here in Austin, where again, like usually when I play golf, I have, a lot of guys like to drink, some guys smoke pot, whatever. I'll have my little deals that I take. For the last 2 weeks, I played probably 3 or 4 times, stone cold sober, and I fucking love it. I was like, okay, you can do it, dude. Now, like this is all the process and just like giving myself grace as I kind of step into this. And again, remind myself that everything in moderation isn't necessarily something that works for me. It's almost like someone who goes to rehab and they're like, I can't have a sip of alcohol. I can't smoke pot. I can't, do a line of cocaine. Whatever your thing is, like, I actually need to treat myself in that way with those type of restrictions.
Yeah, there's so many good points there. So I think in many cases, like, so for example, the phrase, the prostitute always thinks about God and the priest always thinks about sex. So the thing that you are trying to completely abstain from is the thing that may completely own you. And so for me, it's a case of, okay, am I playing golf because it's the excuse for me to have these substances? Or am I taking these substances to enhance my golf experience? But even like something that comes up for me as you say that, for my example, would be like morning routines. Okay, like absolutely fantastic. And I think for the very vast majority of the people for the time, being able to have something like that is incredible. But I also know much of the time where I've literally just woken up and just dragged my ass down into the office and just sat in front of my computer and started work, like literally rubbing, do you know what I mean, my eyes awake, has been really good. So there was no morning routine before that as well. So the way I like to think about it is like, am I doing something that is causing me to be fragile or anti-fragile? And so if I have to do this morning routine just to get myself going in the day, well, then I'm very fragile, because if I don't have that, if I don't have the coffee, if I don't do my journaling, if I don't do the meditation, if I don't do the breath work and goddamn it, all these other things, well, I'm actually a fragile man because I have to go through this warm-up process rather than just like flicking a switch. Like I remember this when I was coaching MMA fighters. And one thing that I saw in some absolute killers was just their ability to flick the switch. They could be super chill, relaxed, laughing, and they'd flick the switch and they were just a stone cold killer, and they could just walk in, do you know what I mean, in the ring or the octagon, and they could just absolutely destroy somebody. And they were just purely focused on that. And then they could turn the switch off. And I was like, oh, I saw that as healthy.
Wow.
And so for me, it's a case of, okay.
I love this concept of you're fragile, because I feel that when I had all that laid out, these are the 5 things I'm doing every morning, whatever. If I didn't do, there's some self-judgment if I wasn't able to do them all. And like, what does that say about me that I can't just realize that I didn't have time for them? I needed to get to work. I needed to go to the airport. I needed to do whatever.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry. Just love that.
So even like, I enjoy using like when I go traveling as an example of this, because this morning I woke up, alarm went off, and I literally put my clothes on. The Gold's Gym was literally right next door to the Airbnb, which I consciously chose that Airbnb, and just went and did my cardio. I wanted to have a sweat straight up so I could then do that. Then so I could know I could come into this conversation and have this time as my best or better version of myself. And so I didn't go through a morning routine or anything like that. And I've still been able to show up really well.
Yeah.
Now that doesn't negate the fact that, let's say, morning routines have their benefit and there are good things to do. Absolutely. But
do you know Hal Elrod?
No, I don't know.
Oh, Hal put up the miracle morning, right? Absolute gangster. Like, there is a lot of science around that morning routine and the miracle morning and all that. So to your point, absolutely, it works, can work. Point is, it doesn't have to, you don't have to be a prisoner to that.
Yes. And so you don't have to be a prisoner to a morning routine, or maybe, I don't want to use the word should, but shouldn't, but you don't have to be a prisoner to the morning routine. You don't have to be a prisoner to caffeine. You don't have to be a prisoner to, I take cannabis to play golf, so I have a bit of experience. I can just play a round of golf. Now, I don't know why, because as Winston Churchill said, golf is a great way to ruin a good walk. But there's the case of like, am I needing to do these things to actually find joy or contentment in those? And then something you brought up before, let's say, having like 3 days with Derek Sivers was just like the coolest thing ever, because he's the master of simplicity, the master of it. And I wrote an essay after I had that time with him. And it was like how he just completely changed my view of success and life and how I want to show up. And
by the way, where can people find that? And we'll link to it in the show notes. But
it's on chrisdufey.com, the essay. I don't exactly know the name.
Okay.
The headline.
We'll link to it.
Actually, it's chrisdufey.com/Sivers. I think that should go to it. And for me, I say something along these lines in that actual essay where it's like, he doesn't question why you in this box. He questions why there's a box at all. And being able to have that pure simplicity of really drilling down why you're doing something or a concept or an idea or a principle or of any of these things to its simplest form that is most effective and most useful. And that was just so, for me, it was so literally life-changing to see somebody operate like that. And to see somebody where, well, I had seen him, he'd just finished writing his new book, Useful, Not True. And now he had this list of kind of things to work through. And I asked him, and I think it's in the podcast recording with him, but I asked him, I was like, how do you plan your days? Like when you wake up, how do you know what you're going to do? And he's like, I don't. And it was just refreshing to be able to hear that. Now, does that mean everybody should do that? No. And I think, again, that's where people are looking for such simplistic prescription answers to their life. No, have some fucking balls, have some fucking wisdom, have some intellectual, have some like something that is actually going to you helping yourself, some responsibility for yourself to be able to take what this person is doing, to look at this other person. Because for me, I was like I said to Derek, I was like, dude, I have one selfish expectation out of having this time with you. And that is, I want to know if the life you live is the life that I want to live, because I've looked up to you for so long. I've read all of your stuff, blah, blah, blah. This is incredible. And I want to know what I formulated in my head as to this North Star and this life that I want to emulate. Is that what I want to move into? Because I get to see behind the scenes and truly know that. And so much of it was yes, it was. So I walked away from that time going, oh, like I want to do things differently now. And if I frame that in not an experiment, but if I frame it like it's a season. So for example, you going away for summer, you've got this, it's a different season. What do you want to do in this different season? You can operate and do something differently and perceive something differently. And maybe even, dare I say, have a different personality or identity through that as well. And you can change, you can shift, and you can be malleable as who you are to hopefully have more contentment, peace, and equanimity with yourself, but then show up as somebody the more useful with myself as well. Like I even write against, and you said before, I literally, like when I'm having podcasts and conversations, I just bring my journal so I can take notes for myself. And so something that was really interesting as to like something I got told yesterday in a conversation was, the gift of me in satisfaction is the greatest gift I can give to the world. Now that was really hard for me to take on, and why I actually wrote a bit about that was because I'd never asked myself, am I satisfied with something? But it is, for me, I perceive that as like, oh, I get to be selfish. I get to take care of myself, but because I'm actually taking care of myself, I'm able to be better for the world as well. So maybe you can use the analogy like you put your mask on first before you help somebody else put their mask on. And so for me, I found that almost difficult to chew on to begin with, because I was like, oh, like I get to truly take care of myself. And what I deemed as selfish was a very incorrect perception as to how I was looking at it.
Yeah, this is, correct me if I'm wrong, but this is very much the same concept of kind of what are your needs and how do you get your needs met, and you know, that's something that I have forever struggled with. I think I know the roots of it is just from a young age, I was, not that my parents didn't take care of me, but there's a lot of shit that I need to take care of myself. And I'm super grateful for that. Creative resilience, resourcefulness, yada, yada, yada. And, this idea of I can take care of myself was very important for me. And I think being able to play from that perspective, it really kind of throws the victim mentality out the window. It's like, this is all on me. The problem is, for me, being in relationship, particularly with my wife, she wants to know what my needs are. And then she wants to meet those needs. Now, if I'm not taking the time to sit and think about what my needs are, there's no way she's going to know what they are. Because I still, to this day, I've fucking talked about this before, I don't know what they are. It's such a foreign concept of, what do I really need? And I don't know if it creates some sort of thought of weakness or vulnerability of lack of safety. Because if I need something, that means I can't take care of it myself. And so now I'm exposed to whatever.
Exact example with myself is I'm just so like, oh my God, you're like parroting the stuff I've just gone through and felt myself. Was I didn't know until recently that I needed to be nurtured by my wife, because I had this belief that I was operating from that I wasn't even able to look at until it really came blaringly in front of me, which was a case of, if I need to be nurtured and taken care from my wife, then I'm being not the man that I want to be. I need to be completely resilient. And I was the exact same, where both my parents were 17 when I was born. So I grew up in a family with like very little money, and I was an only child through that entire process. So after I saw Derek, I had to fly from Wellington to Bali, but I had a stopover in Sydney, and that's where I was from, where my parents are. And the layover, it was like a 10-hour layover. So I messaged my dad and I was like, hey, Dad, I'm going to be laying over for a while in Sydney. I can just leave my suitcase. I'll jump in an Uber. I'll come see you. Let's go have a workout and have lunch together and have some time together. And so we did, and it was amazing. And in that time, I shared with him, because I'd never shared with him before, the success I've created and what's going on, and financially where I'm at and all of this stuff, which is all fantastic. But I'd never shared that with my father. And I had to do that to almost cut the cord between myself and my dad, because I didn't need his approval anymore. I didn't need to have that. And I could kind of be more of my sovereign being as a man myself with that. But it was also very much a case of I needed to be able to share with him what is actually really going on, so I could then actually figure out who I am without having to have that validation from my father. And I shared with him, I was like, I'm so happy I've become this man, and I know that has happened because you never gave me anything. Like, they gave me love and all that stuff, but like no money, for example, and stuff like that. And I was like, I'm so happy that was the course I went through. And I know it was heaps harder for me, but I had to build that resilience. I had to do that. And that's where I think, as a father as well, like for our children, you don't want to give them everything. Like, one of the concepts that I have as a parent is like, I'm not going to do something for my children that they can do themselves. And so I want my 4 daughters to have that ability that they can go and do things, and they can do hard things. And you only know that you can do hard things by doing hard things. And by the nature of doing hard things, you're going to fail at many of those as well. So therefore, failure is a prerequisite for you to be able to build that characteristics, that skill set, and that identity. So it's a hard thing as a parent to have to let your children fall on their face, and quite literally at times as well.
Yes.
Which that sucks, but is, again, what I believe helps nurture somebody to be a great adult and great life.
Yeah. And that's, well, it's something that when you didn't grow up with means, there wasn't much choice, but for, you not to get everything you want. You got what you got. And when your kids are growing up in a home that has means, it's a very different experience. And I just had the conversation with two of my kids the other night, and I was like, I know y'all think like you're getting whatever. And I'm like, I don't know if you can understand this at your age, but like, I don't want to rob you of your life experience of figuring out shit on your own. It doesn't mean I won't support you and your mom won't support you in certain ways, but there's no like chunk of money coming to you. There's like, I know it sounds like it would be awesome to just like, you hit whatever age and you just get a bunch of money, and it's like, it's not going to be yours. It's not going to feel good.
I really agree. I actually have a close friend, and one of his business partners is extremely wealthy, and that business partner gave one of his children $100 million. And when my friend told me this story, I was like, oh, that could really be a disservice for a very young 20-year-old given
God
$100 million. And so, yeah, that's, and I agree with you. And I think that's where like the conversation, my eldest is 11. So my daughters at the moment are 2, 4, 7, and 11. And so I know, and then a couple of times it's come up where they've said something like, oh, like we'll just buy another one. Like if something breaks or something, like, we can just buy another one. Like, yes, we have the means to be able to buy another one, but like take care of the things that you have, appreciate and be grateful for those things that have. And to be perfectly honest, they really do show their gratitude. And it's something that I'm just so impressed by them as well. But it's also a case of like, mum and dad are rich and wealthy, but you're not rich and wealthy.
Yes.
There is a difference there as well. Yes. And I very much thought about, do you mean like, what do I want to leave my children? I'm not 100% there yet. Hopefully I've got a bit of time up my sleeve to then figure that out. But yeah, I think for now, my wife and I have come to the idea of like, oh, like if we just left them each a home, you're always going to have a roof for yourself. I even heard someone talk about recently, because I was thinking about like, I've got 4 daughters. And so if I leave money for them or assets for them or whatever, what if they get married and does that get split with the partner? And then what happens if they split and blah, blah, blah? Like, so can I actually structurally have like in my will and in a contract that they get given something, but it doesn't go towards their partner? Or like, I'm just thinking through those processes.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's like a total rabbit hole. And it's like trying to, really solve for all the kind of eventualities about something that may never happen, right? It's almost like, to your point earlier.
Am I finding a perfect answer to the wrong question?
Yeah, maybe. But it's part of the process too, of maybe you go down that rabbit hole and you're like, I think we're good. And this is how can we keep this really simple? And it is what it is. They'll learn from it one way or the other. If their partner gets it and then they get divorced, then they don't have any of the money. And it's like, there's real learning in that for certain. Now, would we want like our human heart dad side doesn't want our daughters to go through that? Maybe more so our sons, but our daughters no. And our soul's like, absolutely, they need to go through that. So like where do we, again, it can be both.
By doing what I just said, am I trying to not let them fall on their face?
Potentially.
As with a toddler, if you're going to walk off that step and do that, you're going to fall on your face and hurt yourself.
Yeah.
You just did it. Like, okay, come here. Let me hold you. Let me care for you. Let me help you stop crying.
Yeah.
But like I told you so, but you've got to learn that lesson sometimes through your own experiences and actions as well. And that's where like myself as a parent, I think where I come to the most solace with the understanding is I really can just show up and demonstrate and be my best self through it. It's like the Marcus Aurelius quote, do not argue what a good man should be one. And so do not argue what a good parent should be one. How can I just be the best version of myself? Because our children are ultimately going to learn by us just demonstrating and being and them seeing what we do rather than the gobble that falls out of our mouth hole and what we're trying to tell them. Some things have come up recently where I feel like I've been able to have some really great conversations with my oldest daughter, and she's very receptive to these things and these conversations that we've had recently, and she's been able to like act from them. But then also I've seen her in pain in certain situations and where I'm like, yeah, you've just got to feel that. And I've said that to her as well. I was like, hey, this thing that you're going through, this is a part of it. And if you're having like these difficulties at school and with friends and they're acting like this, do you know what I mean? Some people are just going to act like that and that's perfectly fine. But that doesn't change who you are or your worth or how you act and show up. Like you still be a kind person. Like doesn't mean you have to take shit from somebody. Like turn away and walk away or like punch them in the throat if you need be sort of thing. Like I'm not advising the violence, but like take care of yourself in that way. But anyone and me included is in the problems or pain that she was going through was like, yeah, like there are people in life that you may be friends with and they're not friends with. I've certainly gone through that. And for me, I've been probably more too stringent in the like, who do I let in? And just being very like, oh no, like this person I absolutely adore. I love, I respect. Oh my God, I want more time with Cal. Like, do you know what I mean? Anytime I can get with it, I'm going to lap this shit up. It's amazing. Where other people is be like, don't see this truly adding value to my life. There is a mismatch here. I'm going to distance myself and just separate out.
Yeah. This is exactly why I have the podcast. It's like the shit that we just worked out. I mean, we've worked out plenty of stuff today, but with my son, it's like I've had a lot of tension lately. Like, all right, maybe I just got to sit him down and be like, all right, dude, like we gotta, it's time. Like I'm done kind of watching you not like be on the path that feel whatever the words were going to be. Like I've been like working this out in my mind and it's like, no, I just need to let him know that I'm here. I'm here. I love him. Whatever he needs, you know, I'm here to support him and to let him really have his own experience and have his journey.
I think one of the most impactful things my father ever said to me was when I moved from Sydney. So I was 26 at the time. I moved from Sydney to Dubai. My wife was pregnant with our first child and I had to go through that experience. Like he thought, and many people thought it was a complete joke. Like I was like, yeah, I'm moving to Dubai. I've sold our house. I've given all my clients away. Like my wife's going to stay here. I'm going to fly back in time for her to give birth. Like it was like, I look back, utterly absurd, this whole situation. And then he did say to me, he's like, if it doesn't work out, if it doesn't fail, you can always come back and crash on our couch. Do you know what I mean? And it was like, you're not going to die, right? Like the worst case scenario was you're going to be sleeping on your parents' couch. It's kind of, and I actually slept on the couch for 3 months while in Dubai setting up that business. So like that was like the worst case scenario. And so I knew my ego wouldn't let that happen in the first place, but it was almost, thanks Dad for knowing I'm not going to die from this. Yes. And there's like that, the worst case scenario is this. Yeah, that's not going to be fun, but that's what it is. And you can pick yourself back up and get back on with life after. And I think that as a father could be something doing really miraculous. Maybe your son's just like, and again, maybe there's so many different ways to look at it. Maybe he's acting that way because he wants you to fight for his love.
Yeah.
He's like, oh, I just really want my dad to show me. Like there's so many different ways.
Yeah.
And again, I think the way I try and look at these things is I see this in so many different aspects where it's so many good things are behind hard conversations. Like sitting down with my wife or sitting down with my parents or sitting down with my daughter or sitting down with a business partner and just having that hard conversation, like hard, doesn't mean it's a bad. And I think so many people think those two words.
Oh, you said hard and I seized up a little bit.
Yeah, it's like
oh, I know what you're talking about.
No. Like that's hard does not equal bad. Right. Hard just means you're going to have to, it's not the most pleasant conversation
Discomfort.
you're going to have, but you have it. And then, oh my God, there is some real beauty behind it. Like I think marriage is one of the easiest examples to look at with that. Like you have those conversations, it sucks, can even cause conflict that could happen for a minute to a week or whatever. But then after it, there is some real beauty and freedom behind it.
Yeah. I think that's a great place to wrap. This has been, per usual, just amazing having you in. I'm so glad you're in town. You reached out. We did this.
Oh, of course, I appreciate you.
You come in at just the right time so you can play therapist for me.
Dude, it's me playing therapist and needing therapists for myself. But I think I was just thinking about what I've loved about this conversation is it's been so meta about us talking about these things. And I think why I enjoy these conversations, why I think these conversations are actually really useful is because we're not being like, here are the 8 steps for this, or like conversations where it's about, oh, you have this concept or you did this tweet and let's just talk about this kind of thing. It's like, no, how do we actually make sense of all of this together and talking about that? And I think those conversations, like I was thinking about how amazing would it be if we just recorded the conversation in the car?
I thought the same thing. We were driving. I'm like, no one wants to listen to 2 guys in a car, but I'm like, fuck, we are just hitting on some really hearty things right now.
And it's an interesting part when I think of the what I want to consume and what I think is just not really done. And so I remember watching Jerry Seinfeld's Comedians in Cars Getting Coffee.
Yes.
Have you ever watched that?
I've watched a handful of them.
Yeah. So I remember one night watching this show and I just had this huge epiphany. And then I tried to start telling my wife and she didn't give 2 rats about what I was saying. But I was like, oh my God, he's doing exactly what he loves. He loves talking with comedians, talking shop. He loves cars. He loves coffee. He's created a show like it's like the money making, meaning making, exact same thing.
Yeah.
Like, do you mean slam dunk, swish, incredible. And so for me, I was like, and then as I was talking, then Lauren goes, well, what would be your version of this? And I'd be like, philosophers on mushrooms going for a walk. I kind of said tongue in cheek. I was like, if I could do a podcast, it's essentially like we go for a walk, we're on mushrooms and we're just talking like what's coming up in life. I find that really satisfying. And so it's like these conversations where it's like somebody, the listener, I hope feels like they're sitting here with us and they're being a part of that conversation as well. Because I feel like that can be truly helpful for them as well, because we're not coming down from the mountain with tablets telling them doing the exact rules to follow.
Yeah. 2 things. One, I would be interested to see if we had the proper setup and we had like someone in the car in the back, like,
would it still be the same thing?
That's what I'm thinking. I don't know that it is because there's like a camera here and there and it's just like.
So I slightly tested this with Derek Siver. So we recorded 2 3.5 hour bouts. Now, a bunch of it will have to get cut out for like confidentiality and privacy reasons so we recorded, but there was no cameras. It was just a mic. So Derek rocked up and he was like, he had 2 mics. He's like, let's record. And I was like, oh, of course. So, and it was interesting. So we did that sitting in a cafe, top floor of a museum, just the 2 of us sitting down with a mic. I completely forgot that this thing was getting recorded, until like, oh, I've got this lapel and I've got to take this thing off. So it is an interesting point that you bring up. Are you going to be the same if there's cameras and everything and lights and
the camera fucks it up? I think having the mic, I think you're right. I think after a minute or however long, you just forget about it.
Yeah. Because it was like, for example, with Derek's conversations, there were many times where we'd said stuff and it was like, oh, actually beep that out. So then the editor can go through and actually take those things out.
Great.
So things would come out of our mouths and they go, oh shit, actually this is getting recorded. Take that out.
Yeah.
And then kind of keep going from it as well. But I think you also conversations like having in the car, not everything's got to be fucking recorded as well.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? Like
Right.
not everything's supposed to be on social media.
No.
Like,
Yeah.
and I think that's as a creator, I don't want to have to create absolutely everything. And even like I had this conversation with Dan Martell. I was like, I don't want a dude with a camera following me everywhere.
Yeah.
That to me just doesn't feel like fun. Like I like the concept of I sit down, jump in front of the camera. Do you mean gabble? Do you mean stuff falls out of my mouth and then that's it? So there is that different interplay. And I appreciate Dan for doing what he does.
Yeah.
Because so much wisdom comes out of his mouth. It's like, that's really good. That's really good.
Really good.
So he structured that. And again, that's to the case of do what you need to do that best suits you right now. Like again, that's probably been the theme of today's conversation of us trying to figure this stuff out. But do you.
Well, Dan, and Dan shows what's possible when you commit to the structure, these strategies, and how you handle your socials and the content and repurposing, just like stuff you've already done. So you don't have to create new, like, it's like, I'm a part of his mastermind and I haven't been on it for a while because I was up in Idaho and I'm like, I am not in the mindset for it. But I would say for about 2 months, I was on every week and it was like, I always got great nuggets from him. He's really, really good at that.
He's one smart cat. That what I love about it is that genuine person behind the scenes. Like he's a really goddamn loving, nice, smart guy.
Yes. And firm.
Yeah.
He can take shit from anyone.
Yeah.
But he is loving too. The other thing I was going to say is, did you ever watch The Sopranos?
A little bit, Tony.
I did too. And they came out with a 2-part documentary with David Chase on Max, HBO Max. And so I watched that a couple of weeks ago and was just like, oh, fuck, this show was incredible. So I started watching it again. And so I'm about midway through season 2. And let me tell you, the 20-year gap of who I was when I watched it the first time to who I am now, it's a completely different series. I am fucking so resonant with Tony's experience as a husband, as a father, as someone who's leading people. Like, and there's so much more depth to this show than I ever knew. The conversations with Dr. Melfi and like, it is like, holy shit. I just saw the cool shit that was happening, on the surface, but
you can see different layers now.
There's just like, oh my, it's like almost having a bit of a coaching therapy session when I watch. And it sneaks in there. There's shit every show that I'm like, yeah, I get that. Okay, so I'm not that fucked up. This is a common thing. And this is maybe how I could handle it better because I get to see like how I've handled it in the past by watching it on TV. It's like, that doesn't work. It's fascinating. And I mean, the show holds up this many years later.
That's incredible. That's when you know something is truly remarkable. Like I look at that with like people's writing. Like you might look at some of the ancient philosophers and how their writing is still so salient for today. It's like, that's remarkable writing. I was listening to Robert Greene talk about this and how when he writes, he wants it to be long lasting. And so there's a certain style to write, certain things to say and not to say, so it can last the test of time. Because if something was written 2,000 years ago and it's still so salient and palpable for today, like that is a beautiful piece of writing. And so like I think about when you're talking about you seeing these characters and what you're picking up with now, that for me is like why I go back to many of the same books. Because I'll reread a book and I'll be like, I don't even remember reading this like last time. So like you're just so seeing things differently. And I guess that's what you see the world as you are in that case, because you have this lens so that you're only searching for this stuff because you have this certain viewpoint and beliefs and identity. So then when you look at it as a different human being, hopefully a little wiser, you go, you're picking something different.
Yeah. Love that. Well, dude, thanks for being here. I love having you on. Just love being with you.
Thank you, bro. I appreciate it.
Yeah.